Now, let's talk about anger and aggression. I want to offer a content warning at the beginning of this video because we are going to be talking about things like domestic violence and abuse, and I want you to be aware of that in case you are sensitive to those kinds of conversations. I want to start this conversation with a number of statistics. 60% of people experience hurt feelings more than once a month. 25% of women and 16% of men have been stalked. 46% of children have been hit, shoved, kicked, or tripped on an average month. And nearly 2 million people report being the victim of workplace violence every year. Violence and abuse definitely constitute a dark side of interpersonal relationships. And as you might imagine, communication plays an important role in contributing to, but also preventing and understanding interpersonal violence. We're going to talk about a lot of different types of interpersonal violence, starting with intimate partner violence, or IPV. Intimate partner violence refers to the physical, verbal, and emotional violence that occurs between two people who are in or who were recently in a romantic relationship. So intimate partner violence happens exclusively within romantic relationships. And it takes several different forms. The first of these is intimate terrorism, or IT. In intimate terrorism, one partner uses violence to have general control over the other partner. And this violence can take many different forms, including economic abuse by controlling access to money, using children to get them on the abuser's side and turning them against the abused partner, threatening to take children away, keeping the abused partner in isolation from their friends and family, and emotional abuse by degrading the self-esteem and intimidating the other partner. So it's not just physical violence. So much of this is verbal and emotional violence as well. And in some cases, the abused partner might turn back on the abuser in what we call violent resistance, or VR. Violent resistance is another type of violence between intimate partners, but it's often a reaction or a response to intimate terrorism. So the person resisting uses violence as a response to a partner that is violent or controlling, and is most often triggered by living with an intimate terrorist. In this case, the resistor is not attempting to control the other partner, but it's simply a reaction to the abuse that is being felt. And the overwhelming majority of intimate terror violence is committed by men and directed towards women. And so it makes sense that most of violent resistance is committed by women and is directed towards men who are intimate terrorists. Another form of intimate partner violence is situational couple violence, or SCV. This is the most common type of intimate partner violence and is often provoked by a particular situation that is emotional or difficult that leads someone to respond or react with violence. And this is the type of violence that we most often imagine when we hear the term domestic violence. But domestic violence also includes many other types of abuse that happen outside of romantic relationships. So let's talk about those kinds of abuse. Child abuse is another type of interpersonal violence that presents a serious problem in the United States. In the case of abusive parents, they are often not able to distinguish between mistakes and intentional behaviors of the child. So they see honest mistakes as intended and therefore react negatively to the child as a result. Abusive parents also communicate generally negative evaluations to their child, saying, for example, "You can't do anything right," or "You are a bad boy" or "a bad girl," things like that. And when children don't exhibit positive behaviors, Abusive parents will be more likely to use external attributions as well, which creates a lot of uncertainty and is often really scary for the child, and it creates a really unstable climate. This can result in lower self-esteem and can create really erratic or aggressive behavior in the child as well. Additionally, adolescent to parent abuse is increasing in recent times, and parents might be embarrassed to report it. But usually, adolescent to parent abuse onsets between the ages of 10 to 14 and happens when children engage in verbal, emotional, and physical attacks on their parents in order to wear them down and get what they want. So, abusive adolescents may also direct their aggression at their siblings, but oftentimes because the parent is the one who can grant things to the child, that's where the abuse will go. Ultimately, psychological and emotional abuse can be present in any relationship. And almost all people have experienced at least one incident of psychological or verbal aggression from a current or past dating partner. Communicative aggression is the recurring verbal or nonverbal communication that significantly and negatively affects a person's sense of self. It can take the form of degrading, which means that we are humiliating the other person, blaming them, berating them, name-calling. It can be physical or emotional withdrawing, such as giving someone the cold shoulder. It can be restricting another person's actions, such as over-monitoring them, controlling access to money or access to friends and family. It can take form of dominating them, so bossing them around, controlling their decisions. And it can take the form of threatening physical harm, either to the self, to the relational partner, or to friends, family, or pets of the relational partner. And while incidents of communicative aggression might not reach the level of abuse that is found in, say, an intimate terrorist situation, it is a pervasive form of abuse. And psychological abuse can be even more damaging and have much more wide-ranging and persistent effects than other types of abuse, such as higher rates of depression, anxiety, stress, eating disorders, and even attempts at suicide. So as we can see, anger and aggression can play really negative roles in our relationships, but it's important that we talk about these things, and it's important that we learn how to recognize these different forms of anger and aggression and abuse so that we can communicate more clearly with each other about them and communicate more clearly with our partners, and hopefully be able to recognize those aggressive and abusive behaviors and to be able to leave those relationships when necessary and when possible. So hopefully this lecture has served as a form of communication to help to educate you as to these different forms of abuse that can take place in these different relationships, and you can learn to control those darker sides of our relationships.